Okay, so the current plan is in Mists of Pandaria 5.0, in the initial patch, Valor points will be used to purchase gear off the reputation vendors that unlock when you get to Revered with the respective reputation. The blog that Ghostcrawler had mentioned, we still have plans in the future to evaluate means of upgrading items through spending Valor points, but we felt that that wasn't really the best use of Valor points right at the start of an expansion when players are getting brand new items very frequently and progressing from Dungeon Blues through their raid gear, because it creates a sort of conflict in terms of, do I upgrade the gear that I have now and then replace it? Maybe that doesn't feel so good. Or do I just kind of hoard all my Valor points until I have my heroic gear from the end of the rating tier and then only upgrade that? So we're still experimenting with how exactly we want to implement it. It's an idea that we're still working on and something that we'll probably see in the future.
So my first question is about the boss fights that you like the most. Simply.
Subjective question, I think. I think we all have fond memories. I've been raiding in WoW since, the earliest days of vanilla. So obviously, I think killing Ragnaros with my guild for the very first time in Molten Core many, many years ago. I don't think we've ever screamed so loudly on Vent. But I think bringing that up to the present day, I think actually the heroic Ragnaros encounter in Firelands fairly recently, I think that really lives up to a lot of the expectations of an epic final boss fight, multi-stage encounter with totally different abilities, different phases to work through, incredible challenge and coordination required, and then that extra fourth phase where Ragnaros comes out and you see his legs in the heroic mode only, and really it becomes a whole new fight at that point. So I thought that was really a successful encounter.
Wait, he has legs?
He has legs.
Wow. And what about in Mists of Pandaria, the fight?
Okay. Well, in Mists of Pandaria in particular, again, it's like asking me to pick a favorite child. I think there are so many different, different varieties of raid encounters. Favorite boss, I think I'm just going to have to say the final boss of the 5.0 tier, and that's the Shah of Fear, the Terrace of Endless Spring. That's, very manifestation of fear itself, and I think it was one of the cool things that we did in terms of designing the abilities of the encounter is that, you really are fighting fear, and all the abilities tie into that theme, and, by freeing other Pandaren on the outskirts of the encounter that have been corrupted and overcome with fear themselves, you can gain hope and the ability to stand against fear, and that's essential to defeating the encounter. And so I think visually, thematically, and also the mechanics of the fight, they all tie together to create a really solid boss encounter.
Yeah, can you give us any information about the legendary questline?
Sure, I can. So the legendary questline this time around is going to work a little bit differently. It's a large, massive, epic questline. It's going to span multiple patches. So what you have right now in 5.0 is just the first part of a long chain. And if you look at the achievement interface, there's kind of a little hint about that. There's more to come in the future. So Rathion, the last remaining Black Dragon and the heir to the Black Dragonflight, who rogues who did the Legendary Daggers questline in 4.3 may remember, may have worked with, he's come to Pandaria for purposes of his own. And it's not immediately clear really what he's there or what he's up to, but before he can trust you, before he can let the player in on his plans, he needs you to prove yourself to him. So what you're doing in 5.0 is really gaining favor with Rathion. You're working up your reputation with him, with the Black Prince, by defeating his enemies and by proving that you're powerful. And once you've accomplished the initial tasks that he sets out for you, he gives you a legendary gem. It's an orange gem that increases your stats by your strength. Strength is actually a fantastic tank stat. Okay. No, you shake your head. It actually genuinely is better than stamina would be. I promise you, it is better than stamina. You really want it because it increases your parry, and it's actually a significant amount of avoidance as a result.
And can only one player complete the quest?
No, every single person in your raid can do this. It's a matter of there's individual parts that you can go off and farm wrap on your own to gain favor with him, and then there are drops from bosses in the raid. So those gems go into their Shah-touched weapons that are available from the final bosses in the tier that have sockets in them that will take only this gem. And that's kind of the first step. And this will continue to be picked up in patch 5.1 and beyond, and that will carry you forward, and we'll see what the future holds there.
Okay. So with the release just a month away, what are we going to see during the pre-event?
Sure. So, excuse me. Towards the end of the month, we will be releasing the new 5.04 patch, you're going to see, of course, all your town spec that gets redone. Basically, all systems work is released. We hold all the data for Mists of Pandaria itself. But with Theramore Isle, which is a scenario nobody's seen on the beta itself, we've been playtesting internally, that goes live. That gives you a preview of what's going on with the end of this destroyer, with the fall of Deathwing. We now have a world that doesn't have a huge boss to threaten the world with. So the Alliance and the Horde are no longer united against a common foe. The Theramore's Fall, you'll get a tease of what's actually happening now in the world, which will, of course, lead up to the opening of Pandaria.
Okay. So we know that Garrosh is the main villain of the expansion, at least during the siege of Grimmar. Does he will came in Pandaria, maybe in patch 5.1, when the war will be at one of the regions?
Yes, and I think so. Players are going to experience the story of the Alliance and the Horde, of Varian and Garrosh, as they bring their war against each other and against the opposite factions, the continent of Pandaria. So, I mean, the way this starts out, the way every player's experience in Pandaria begins, there's this shipwreck that has occurred that has, made players discover the island, and you're reporting to your faction leader. You're telling Varian on the Alliance side, you're telling Garrosh on the Horde side, that this shipwreck has occurred, this new land has been discovered. Both of them have the same response. Mobilize our army, get all of our ships out there immediately. And in 5.1, yes, the full fleet, the full armies of the Alliance and Horde are going to arrive on the shores of Pandaria, and they will clash there. And I think the story of this expansion, in many cases, in many ways, is going to be, but the story about a conflict between the Alliance and the Horde, the effect they have upon this once tranquil land, and how they transform it, but also how it transforms them. And so, we'll have to see what the future holds with Garrosh, but that's definitely going to be a big part of the story.
Okay, my question is, in Hard 4, there are two encounters, the Bladelord and the Windlord, but I think they must move their names, because the Bladelord only has wind abilities and the Windlord only have blade abilities. Why?
It's actually kind of an inside joke among us as well. But no, there actually is a real purpose for it. The Bladelord, I mean, he is the arms master. He wields a sword. He dashes very quickly and strikes people, makes them bleed. He attacks with weapons primarily. Now he has a couple of wind abilities, but the idea is more that he moves so quickly that he creates cyclones. Windlord Mel'Durek, he's the leader of the flying manted that come in. So he's the Windlord in the sense that he's carried by the wind and is a flyer. Now, in the second phase of the Windlord fight, he creates wind bombs, for example, which are a wind-based ability. I mean, the abilities used by the manted are a mix of physical attacks, wind-based things, some sonic things, and then shaping amber. So, they draw upon all those different influences.
Okay, so I would like to talk about the word PvP. What are you going to promote this kind of PvP? Are you going to do any kinds of incentives, like, for example, I think you've mentioned back at the press tour in March that doing the word PvP stuff would get your conquest cap increased. Is that still on the table?
That is not currently implemented. I think one of the tricky things with giving a reward directly for role PvP is that it leads to degenerate behavior. In many cases, it's very exploitable. Players will often take the path of least resistance, and that could turn into kill trading, South Shore Hillsbrad style, not necessarily in the best of ways. I think world PvP we find is best when unplanned, when players' individual incentives and motivations bring them to the same place, and those motivations come into conflict, and that leads to combat. So, I mean, I think a clear example is something like the world bosses in the outdoors that we have. The world boss Salus's Warband, Galleon, in Valley of the Four Winds. I mean, that spawns once or twice a week. It has unique drops that you can't obtain anywhere else. And on PvP servers, both factions are going to want to kill him whenever he spawns. And if the other faction's there first, well, the only way you're going to get it is by attacking and killing the opposite group so that you can get the tap and you can get the loot. The Black Market Auction House, which has rare items that will be up for bid, and there's no buyout on them, so it's just whoever has the highest bid at the end. That isn't a contested PvP area, so, if you have the highest bid, you can kill and corpse camp anyone of the opposite faction that comes nearby, have your friends do that to stop them from, placing their bids. We also have some other little toys and things scattered around the world. You know, there's an item you can get from a rare spawn that actually dismounts flying players and prevents them from mounting again. So if you want to track someone down, make sure they can't escape easily, you can do that to aid you. So I think we're offering reasons to engage in world PvP. And we think that, you know, on PvP servers where players are looking for conflict, it'll naturally result.
During the patch of Dragon Soul, there was lots of dungeon in the Cavern of Time. Does in Mists of Pandaria there will be a new instance of Red, like a crazy example, the first fall of Terramore, when Chen and Rexar came in Terramore to kill the father of Jaina?
I mean, that's certainly a cool idea. I think one of the great things about the Caverns of Time is that it really offers endless opportunities. We have all these moments in Warcraft lore that we've yet to explore that, you know, have been covered in the RTS games or in the books. And, you know, it's the chance to really take players there and show it to them, have them experience firsthand. You know, things like the Well of Eternity that we had in the 4.3 patch. We don't currently have any Caverns of Time instances in Mists of Pandaria, but it's, you know, very likely something we're going to visit in the future just as a device for introducing players to epic content and epic moments.
Can you tell us more about the raid instance that comes with 5.1? Or
no, we're focused on the Mists of Pandaria launch at this point. I mean, obviously we are working on the next raid instance to follow, but we'll discuss that in the future.
And it's still the plan to bring patches more quickly? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're committed to delivering content on a more regular basis, faster, while still keeping the same level of quality that, you know, we demand and that our players demand of us.
Yeah, I actually...
One last question.
Okay, so I actually do have a follow-up about that. What is your current model for the patch cycle for the Mists of Pandaria? Are you going to do patches like 4.1 with only 5-man stuff, or are we going to do major patches with both raids and 5-man stuff?
Well, we're not ready to release our actual patch schedule yet and what the actual patch content will be. But our stated goal and the goal that Tom Chilton spoke about previously is just that. Our goal is for, as you consume each content patch, whether it's the expansion release or 5.1, etc., that these are paced out a lot more evenly, such that our player base is consuming that, done with it, and ready for the next patch as well. So right now we're not going to say exactly how many dungeons we're releasing in each patch or when the raid tiers are going to be released, but players should expect a much more even release as opposed to what we did in Cataclysm, which was obviously a very weirdly staggered release of patches.
Does the War Walker will be available in the future for other continents like the Eastern Kingdom, Kalimdor, or Northrend?
Sorry, is the what?
The Lore Walker.
Oh, the Lore Walker.
I mean, the Lore Walkers are a faction that's kind of really inherent indigenous to Pandaria. They are a group of Pandaren that have devoted themselves to uncovering and unearthing the rich history of their own continent. You know, there's ancient history there. It was a continent that was ruled by the Mogu Empire thousands of years ago that subjugated all the other races there. But then they kind of fell into ruin and almost mysteriously vanished. And so they have secrets left behind. And the Lore Walkers are really specifically devoted to unearthing the history of their own lands. I mean, obviously there are historians throughout the world. You know, you see folks like Bran Bronzebeard who make repeat returns, always excavating archaeological sites, trying to figure out what was going on. And so there are places, you know, and people devoted to the study of history throughout the world. But the Lore Walkers are specific to Pandaria.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Uldra and the way hard modes work these days. Is there, I know it is hard to make every instance like this and every hard mode like this, but it would be really cool if there's one instance where hard modes work like this. Is it a plan for the future, or?
Well, so the Protectors of the Endless encounter in Terrace of Endless Spring is very similar to, let's say, the Iron Council in Ulduar. It does have, you know, a variable hard mode within a hard mode. So you have, you know, normal, heroic, but then also the hard version of normal and the even harder version of heroic. Yes, that gives extra loot. It's higher item level versions if you do it with the hardest enemy last. I think that's something we definitely are open to continuing to explore in the future when it makes sense, if it's not forced. You know, in Ulduar, I think there were some hard modes there where it worked very naturally. There were others where it was kind of confusing how to even begin the hard mode. You know, maybe we put a button on the wall that you push to start it, or, oh, oops, I killed XT's heart. Why is he hitting so hard now? Oh, crap, that's a hard mode. So that wasn't necessarily ideal. You know, it worked very naturally in some places, but not in others. And for the, you know, I think having it tied into the interface was clearer for all players and all parties involved. But where it makes sense in the future, and we think it's, you know, it's definitely fun, and we're always looking to provide more difficulties because we recognize, you know, there's such a spectrum of variation in skill among the players. The more difficulties we can provide within an encounter, the more people we can serve, the more fun players will have.